on the final off-season episode of the show before we get into full regular season Hurricanes talk. We'll be going over the entire Metro Division, who's missing the playoffs, who's making the playoffs, who might even win the division, and I will give you my Stanley Cup prediction. All of that and more on the Wednesday edition of Locked On Hurricanes.
You're Locked On Hurricanes, your daily podcast on the Carolina Hurricanes. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome to the Wednesday edition of Locked On Hurricanes, your team every day, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Thank you to the Everyday for making this your first listen of the day. 5 days a week, Monday through Friday, talking everything about your Carolina Hurricanes. I'm your host, Zach Martin. I'm the credentialed Carolina Hurricanes beat writer over at the Hawkers, also the co-host of the Surgecast, which is a weekly Carolina Hurricanes podcast, along with all of my duties here at Locked On Hurricanes. We have finally made it. It is the last official off-season, in air quotes, episode of the pod before we go into full regular season content, as is the Metro Division predictions episode. I'll go through 8 through 5 teams will be missing through the playoffs. Then we're going to go 4 through 1. Is our wild card team in who will be making the playoffs and who will win the division? And then finally, I will be going over my Stanley Cup prediction, who I think will win the 2026 Cup and who will they beat per the other conference. However, before we jump into all that, today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. Download the FanDuel app now by visiting FanDuel.com and win $300 in bonus bets if your first $5 bet wins. Now, last year was my first full season covering the Hurricanes on Locked On Hurricanes. And my prediction went, it could have been a little bit better. Thank you to, the Rangers decided not to show up. Washington Capitals surprised a lot of people. So, there were some predictions kind of went a little sideways last year. But you know what? It's a new year. Predictions only go so far. You can say, hey, I'm right. You can be like, yeah, it didn't really go my way. So it'll be interesting to see how we will go through this. Like I said, I'll go through in segment 1, going through 8 through 5, giving you my reasons why I think these teams will not make the playoffs at all in terms of the Metro Division. Segment 2, we'll go through 4 through 1. Will there be a wild card team in there? And then who's going to win a division? And then move on from that. We'll talk about the Stanley Cup. Now, if you are on the YouTube side of things, I'm going to put the graphic up right now of my Metro prediction. And you can see it right here on the side of the screen. Obviously, you're going to see all 8 through 1, but I'll give out reasons why as the show goes on. So, teams who are not going to be making the 2026 NHL playoffs. Coming at number 8, the Pittsburgh Penguins. Number 7, the New York Islanders. Philadelphia comes in 6th, and then the New York Rangers in 5th. Yes, you heard that right. So we got 2 of the New York teams, and both of the Pennsylvania teams are not making the playoffs in 2026. Of course, these are my predictions. Anything can happen when everyone hears this. The Rangers and the Penguins have already played, so that's going to be a little bit different, but it's the first game of the season. Another 81 games to go, but this is where I'm looking at between 8 through 5. Pittsburgh, Islanders, Philadelphia, and the Rangers. Now, why the Pittsburgh Penguins at number 8? Well, to be honest, they were the only team looking to sell going into free agency, and while they have gotten some players, I just don't think this is a Pittsburgh Penguins team that remotely, unless they go on some Cinderella run, it's going to be very tough for Pittsburgh to make the playoffs. You got Villikovinen, Sidney Crosby, Rickard Rakell on your top line, Malkin with Justin Brazeau and Anthony Mantha. You look at your bottom 6, it's not that great. Philip Tomasino, Tommy Novak, Connor Dewar, Blake Lizotte, Nola Chari. That's not a top 6 that's really going to blow a lot of teams out of the water. Defensive side of things, they're really relying on Parker Witherspoon, Brian Shea, Caleb Jones. Right side, Erik Karlsson, Chris Letang, Harrison Benicki, who, congratulations to Harrison. He's the first South African skater born there to play in the AHL. So big props to him. Goaltending, I mean, you do have Archer Sivos, who played really well for the Canucks, and more importantly, Abbotsford Canucks, winning the McCalder Trophy last year with Abbotsford after being the Charlotte Checkers. You do have Tristan Jarry in goal as well, but then, some guys are out. Kevin Hayes, Bloomquist, Brian Rust, Rucker McGroarty. I just don't see where the Penguins did a whole lot in the offseason to garner hey, this team is going to do something this year. I just don't feel like the Pittsburgh Penguins have that. And of course, this is, Sidney Crosby's 21st season. And you look at Chris Letang and Evgeny Malkin, those guys have been pretty much together for the last 20 years. They're the first trio to play 2 decades together. But overall, it's just, for me, it's a tough spot when you look at the Pittsburgh lineup and you can feel like, okay, this team might potentially do something. I just don't really see that for them as of right now. So in terms of what you're looking like, it's kind of tough to look at Pittsburgh and be like, yes, this is going to be a team that's going to do something. They were sellers. I just don't feel like they're in a good spot overall. Now we go to number 7 in the New York Islanders. The reason why the Islanders for me is they didn't really do much over the offseason. Yes, you did bring in Matthew Schaefer. You kind of running the same defense back. Romanoff, D'Angelo, Pellich, Pulak, Mayfield. Okay, it's the same defense that was kind of all right, but not the greatest. Can they do, are they going to step up? Who knows? Yeah, you got Varlamov who's out. Pierre Engvall's out. Cal Murchie's out. Ethan Bear. Goalie-wise, yeah, you got Sorokin. You got David Reddish from the Kings, but is that really an upgrade in your goaltending situation? Then you look at your forward core. Jonathan Durant, is he going to finally figure it out for another team? Can Bo Horvat step up? Matthew Barzal. You have Emil Heinen as your top right winger. You got, Anders Lee, Kyle Palmieri. This team is getting older, not really much younger. You got Shabanov, Jean-Gabriel Pageau. You got your bottom line is Tisplakov, the Russian kid that was really excited about last year. Casey Zizekas and Anthony Duclair. That's an okay fourth line, but overall, I just don't see the Islanders as a team that's really going to wow a lot of people either. Yeah, you have a different mindset now of the fact that you don't have Lou Lamoriello there, but did the Islanders do enough to take them over to the top to the next step? I don't think so, and I think, this is a team that's usually catching late very on to sneak into the playoffs at the very end of the year, but I think this is probably the first time that they're probably going to run out of gas and not make the playoffs at all, really, because I just don't feel like they've done enough to shake can these guys actually do it? 6, Philadelphia Flyers. Yes, they've kind of added, sort of for the most part. I mean, yes, now you got Trevor Zegras for the whole year. You got Matvei Michkov, Jean Couturier. Can Christian Dvorak do something for you? Can Owen Tippett and Travis Konechny, go to the next level? Tyson Forrester, Bobby Brink. This is a very young Flyers team, and the fact that you have some, veterans as well, but a lot of young guys in your forward core. But defense-wise, Cam York and Travis Sanheim, those are kind of like your veteran guys. But then you got to look at Nick Sealers and Jamie Drysdale. Those guys are going to take step-ups for the Flyers. You got Adam Ginning and Joel Juulsen. Can those guys do something for you on the defensive side? So I would say your top 4 is maybe okay. Your last pairing is kind of concerning. Then goaltending, Sam Ersson and Dan Vladar. Dan Vladar did pretty good for the Calgary Flames, and Sam Ersson had an okay season for the Flyers. But I feel like Philadelphia is still a team that's in a really tough spot. Goaltending-wise, can they step up? Can their defense step up as well? Because that's an okay defense, but I don't feel like they're going to be shocking a lot of people. And then you look at the forward core. Is the forward core really in an area where you can feel comfortable with them taking that next step? So I think while the Flyers will not be in the bottom 2, I just don't think they're going to be a team that's going to push it to the next level and put them in a good spot within making the playoffs. Now, a team that a lot of people thought were going to win the division last year missed the playoffs entirely, and it's the New York Rangers. Yeah, you have Will Cooley, JT Miller, Mika Zibanejad as your top line, Panarin, Trocheck, Lafreniere. That's a pretty solid top 6. I'll give them some credit. There are some guys to look for in the top 6. JT Miller now is your new captain. Your bottom six is very questionable. Connor Sheary, Noah Laba, Taylor Radich, Matt Rempe, Sam Carrick, and Adam Enstrom is your last pair. Your bottom six is very concerning compared to what your top six looks like. Can your top six kind of carry the load, and can you get some help on the bottom six? That's kind of a big question mark. Defense, yeah, you got Vladislav Gavrikov now. You got Adam Fox, but can Carson Soucy's take a step up? Can Will Borgen step up this year as well? What's Euro Vakanainen going to do? What about Brandon Schneider? That's kind of where you look at your second and third pairs. Are they going to take a step for you? Because the defense was a very big question mark last year. They didn't really help out, but now it's a bigger question mark because you have some guys who are new, some guys that you got last season. You got some guys this offseason as well with Gavrikov and Adam Fox and Brandon Schneider, kind of like your big guys that you're bringing back. Are they going to do something? And then, of course, is your goaltending going to be okay? Igor Shesterkin, yeah, you got a really huge contract. He's a good goalie. But, can the defense and can the team in front of them play well? Can the defense help them? Same thing for Jonathan Quick. Is he going to get the help? So with the Rangers, I feel like for them, the Rangers are just in a tough spot to where your bottom six doesn't really look promising compared to your top six. And I just don't think your defense, it's still a huge question mark after it was a big question mark last season. And some people will believe that the Rangers could win a division, even win a Stanley Cup or something. Some guys from ESPN think that they're going to go win the division. I don't see how with this roster. Of course, a lot of people thought they were going to do it last year and finished outside. They finished fifth. And I don't think they took a step up to overcome what they did last year. Now, they could surprise people. I'm not counting them out entirely, but I have to see what this team has done to take that next step. So for me, I have the Rangers in fifth. Now, that being said, we do see some teams that are within 1 through 4 with a wild card at the number 4 spot. Stick around and we'll talk about those guys here in a second on a Wednesday edition of Locked On Hurricanes. You just realized your business needed to hire someone yesterday. How can you find amazing candidates fast? Easy. Just use Indeed. When it comes to hiring, Indeed is all you need. Stop struggling to get your job posting on other sites. Indeed sponsored jobs put your post at the top of the page and help you reach the right candidates faster. Everyone's been in the top spot where you need to find the right hire like yesterday. The pressure's on, and every day without the right person is a setback. That's exactly when Indeed's sponsored jobs come in handy. They make sure your post is seen by the right candidates right now. Now you can speed up your hiring process with a $75 sponsored job credit. Just go to Indeed.com/lockedon right now and support our show by saying you heard about Indeed on this podcast. Terms and conditions apply. Hiring, well, Indeed is all you need. Welcome back to segment 2 of Locked On Hurricanes, your team every day. Now, we talked about the teams 8 through 5 who I think will miss the playoffs. Like I said, we got Pittsburgh, the Islanders, the Philadelphia Flyers, and the New York Rangers. Now we're going into the top 4 who I think will make the playoffs and who's going to win the division. Obviously, if you're on the YouTube side of things, you see this, but at the number 4 spot, I have the Washington Capitals. Yes, the division winners from last year. I have them 4th, but I do have the wild card marking on their logo. I think that the Metro this year will not just have 3 teams like they did last year. They will actually have 4 teams making the 2026 playoffs. Now, with the Washington Capitals, they were a surprise team last year to a lot of people. Can they do it again this year to where they could make a run to possibly win a division or at least make the playoffs? I think they might take a slight step back because they have gotten younger. I've heard it from, the Washington Capitals podcast host that this team is going younger. Now their head coach has been able to coach some of these guys in Hershey, but will that translate to a team that's not really pushing Ovi to go for a scoring record? And does this team have the roster to what it takes to replicate what they did last year, even though they've gotten younger and there's a bit of changes? Obviously, you got Ovechkin with Strome and Protas. Protas had a big breakout last year. Can he bring it again this year? You got Connor McMichael, Pierre-Luc Dubois, and Tom Wilson on your second line. Anthony Bolivier, Hendricks Lapierre, Ryan Leonard, one of their younger guys, is going to make a step up under the roster this year. They got Brandon Duhaime, Nick Dowd, and Justin Sordiff, former Charlotte Checker, is now at Washington Capitol. He's making, jumping on the AHL roster this year. The bottom six is a little questionable. I think their top six is pretty decent, all things considered, but can they replicate what they did last year despite there's no record to go after? Are you still going to get the same production out of Ovechkin, Strome, Protas, even PLD? What's Connor McMichael going to do? And then your bottom six, are you going to get the support from the bottom six with a lot of younger guys? Defensively, Martin Fehérváry with John Carlson, Jacob Chikrin with Trevor Van Riemsdyk. They got Rasmus Sandin and Matt Roy. Now, obviously, Fehérváry took a big step last year. John Carlson been a veteran for the Capitals for a long time. Chikrin signed that big contract. You also got TVR. That top four could get you into a good spot if you're the Capitals. I can see Washington potentially finishing third in the division, maybe even pushing for second, but it's just, can your bottom six help your top six, and can your defense still take that step that they took last year? Of course, goaltending is different. Logan Thompson, Charlie Lindgren coming back once again. No surprises there. Like I said, I do have Washington in the 4 spot with a wild card. I could see them going up to third, possibly second as well. But I think there's some moves that the other teams ahead of them kind of done that I feel like that maybe is kind of push Washington back a little bit. I'm not saying they're going to completely fall out of the playoffs after winning the division last year and being a top 5 team in the league, but I do see them in around that 2 to 4 range. So obviously that could change depending on how things kind of shake out with the second and possibly third place team in the division. Now coming in third, give me a lot of stock on the Columbus Blue Jackets. They played out of their minds last year. Of course, a lot of the turmoil going on with the loss of, Johnny Gaudreau and his brother Matt. There was a lot to play for last year for Columbus. I really hope they made the playoffs last year. They were really close to doing it. Unfortunately, they just missed the wild card by a little bit. But I think that the Jackets, I believe they have what it takes this year to push it into a wild card, to a playoff spot, and not just a wild card, but I think they could get one of the top 3 spots. So I have Columbus at number 3. I could see them finishing 4th, but still taking a wild card spot like Washington. But for Columbus, you got Voronkov with Monahan and Marchenko. That was a great line for the Jackets last year. Sean Monahan really stepping up to be one of the leaders of the team. And of course, he's got the 2 Russians on his either side. Captain Boone Jenner, hopefully he stays healthy this season. Adam Fantilli looks to take a huge next step in his career. He is going to be someone to really watch for. Cole Sillinger on his other side, possibly Kent Johnson as well. But I love Kent Johnson's game. I think he's going to take a huge step for the Jackets as well. So I could see him possibly swapping with Sillinger on the second line. So then it's whoever's on the third line with Charlie Coyle, who they got in the offseason in that trade, along with Matthew Olivier, who is a tough customer for the Jackets. You got Chinikov, Isaac Lundstrom, and Miles Wood. Wood came over with Coyle in the trade with the Avalanche. 2 really good bottom 6 additions. I think the Jackets might have a sneaky 4 lines that they could roll through the whole season. I think that even if you have Sillinger or Johnson on your third line, with Coyle, who's been there and done that, and Olivier, who's a tough customer, and then you add Miles Wood, and you look for that addition of Chinikov and Lundstrom, I think those guys are going to do really well when you look at that top 6 that the Jackets have. Defense-wise, bringing back pretty much everyone. You got Varinsky with Fabro, Provorov, and Severson. Now you get Denton Matejchuk, who was on a come-up last year for the Jackets within the organization, played really good with the Cleveland Monsters. I think he's going to have a huge season for the Jackets, even though he's still very young. And, of course, with Eric Goodbranson, a great guy to learn from. I think this is a very sneaky defense when it comes to the Jackets. Of Zach Werenski last year, his healthiest season by far, was a finalist for the Norris. I think he is someone who can really watch for a Norris vote, maybe win the whole thing. This defense, I think, is very sneaky for the Jackets. Goaltending is going to be the question mark. I will be 100% on this. Can Elvis Merzlikins overcome that up and down season he had last year? And can Jet Greaves prove that he's the guy for the Jackets? Because he played really well with the Monsters, went up and down a lot between Columbus and Cleveland. I think he's finally solidified his spot in the tandem. Is just, can these 2 guys hold on for the Jackets to get through the season. I think they will make the playoffs. It could be a fourth spot in the wild card, but for me, I have a strong feeling that the Jackets will finish third to claim one of the top 3 automatic spots to make the playoffs. Coming in at number 2, this is where it could get very interesting. I think it's going to come down to the last probably handful of games, maybe about 5 or 6 between 1 and 2. But number 2 is going to be the New Jersey Devils. The big question mark for these guys is, can everyone stay healthy? That is the big thing when it comes to them, because you lost Jack Hughes for a good bit. You lost Luke Hughes. They lost a lot of guys throughout parts of the season last year. Siegenthaler, Hamilton, all of them. Now, they do have a Gabe Danov on their top line, and this will be very interesting with how he does with Jack Hughes and Jesper Bratt. Can Timo Meier finally step up and be that guy for the Devils that they traded for a couple seasons ago? Can Nico Hischier stay healthy for them as well, because he missed a lot of time last year? Dawson Mercer on the right side. Andre Palat, Cody Glass, Connor Brown. Connor Brown, a huge addition for them after he played with the Oilers last year. Paul Cotter, Juho Lammikko, and then RC Gritchick. Gritchick is someone I'm keen to keep an eye on because he's a young kid, but there's a lot of hype around him. Let's see what he does for the Devils. But I think that top 6 is pretty solid. You might even say that top 9 is pretty good too. So if the Devils can keep Hughes, Meier, Hischier, all those guys healthy and going, I think they might be in a good spot. And Connor Brown, can he bring some depth to the scoring for them? Defense, Siegenthaler, Hamilton. We'll see if those guys stay healthy this year. You got Luke Hughes that are hoping to stay healthy. He just got a new contract. Brett Pesce, how is he going to do? Brandon Dillon, Simon Nemec. I'm really curious to see how that bottom pairing is going to do. But I think defensive-wise, I think the Devils' defense could be up there with the Hurricanes in terms of their defense. It's all about health. Right now, Jonathan Kovacevic is out, so is Stefan Nason. Once they get Stefan Nason back, that'll be very interesting. Goaltending, same thing. Markstrom, Allen. Markstrom was really good last year for the Devils. Finally, brought stability to that group. I think the Devils could push for a division title with the Hurricanes. So I think 1 and 2 are going to be very, very close to seeing who can stay the healthiest and have a more stable season when there's not a lot of up and downs back and forth. So I think 1 and 2 are going to be a very close battle of who's going to beat out the other one in their regular season matchups. And I think it's going to come down to the last few games, maybe even the last 2 games of the regular season. And this could be a 5-point difference or fewer to see who's going to take the division. Now, obviously, everyone knows the Hurricanes: Ehlers, Aho, Jarvis, Svechnikov, Stankov, and Blake, Marnixdal, Carrier. You got Hall, either going to be Kokoniemi or Jankowski to see if KK is ready to go for opening night. But as of right now, we're going to say Hall, Kokoniemi, Robinson is your 4th line defensive pairings. Slavin Walker, Miller Chatfield, Nick Keeshan, Gostisbehere, and of course, goaltending. You do have Anderson and Kochetkov. You guys have heard me talk about this all offseason. I think the Hurricanes are probably one of the deepest they've ever been. This will be very interesting to see how Miller, and Nick Keeshan get used to the system as the season goes along. You got Slavin Walker as your top pair. I'm really curious to see how they are as the shutdown defensive pair role for the Hurricanes. Chatfield's going to bring Miller in. Goss is going to help Nikishin. I think that third pair is going to be very one to keep an eye on because it's very offensively minded about how is their minutes going to be used. Of course, we know about their power play units of Svech, Aho, Ehlers, Jarvis, Gostisbehere, and then Hall, Stankov, and Blake, Walker, Miller. I'm really curious to see how those pairings are going to be. I have the Hurricanes winning a division. Obviously, no surprise, I named them last. You want to call it a homer pick, fine, but this is Locked On Hurricanes. But I do believe the Hurricanes did a lot more to put themselves in a good spot to win the division this year, a team who could finish top 5 in the entire league. Bias or unbiased aside, I think this is a Hurricanes team that's very deep who could take strides in the division for the Metro and make a deep playoff run if things break their way. They get the breaks, get the puck luck, and just stay healthy. I think the Hurricanes are in a good spot. Could I see them finishing second in the division? Yes, because the Devils are kind of right there with them. I think this is a 2-team dogfight for the Metro Division this year. Then it's just going to be who's going to be taking 3rd and 4th between Columbus, Washington, maybe even the Rangers. Could someone surprise? Maybe, but I think those are my top 4 teams. You got Washington coming in at the wild card. They could fight for the Jackets for number 3, and then there's going to be a fight for 1 and 2 between the Hurricanes and the Devils. So there you go. Those are my Metro prediction for the 2025-26 season. We got Pittsburgh, New York Islanders, Philadelphia, New York Rangers, Washington Capitals with the wild card, Columbus, New Jersey, and Carolina. Now, all that aside, who am I picking to win the Stanley Cup? Well, stick around. We'll talk about that here in a second on a Wednesday edition of Locked On Hurricanes. The NFL season is here, and FanDuel has an offer you don't want to miss. Right now, new customers can bet just $5 and get $300 in bonus bets if you win. That's right. Pick a bet, put down $5, and if it hits, you'll unlock $300 in bonus bets to use across the app. It makes watching football even more exciting when you got a little something riding on the action. Whether you're a casual fan or love diving into the stats, FanDuel makes the game day experience so much better. So what are you waiting for? Visit FanDuel.com to download the FanDuel app today and get started. Welcome back to segment 3 of Locked On Hurricanes, your team every day. And if you're on the YouTube side of things, you see in the graphic next to me, these are my picks for the Stanley Cup final and who I think will win the Stanley Cup this year. Out of the Western Conference, we have the Colorado Avalanche. And for the Eastern Conference, no surprise, welcome to Locked On Hurricanes because it's the Carolina Hurricanes making it in the Eastern Conference. They finally break the curse of not making the Cup final since 2006. I think they will make it to the Cup final this year. Doesn't matter who they play in the first round, the second round, or the Eastern Conference final. I think the Hurricanes have what it takes to do it. Like I said, they got to get some puck luck along their way. Guys got to get hot at the right time, get the overall depth scoring. Guys stay healthy. All of that happens. Everything goes their way. I have the Hurricanes making the final. Now, the Locked On Avalanche guys had the same teams in the Stanley Cup final, but they have the Colorado Avalanche over the Carolina Hurricanes. But not so fast, my friend, because I am doing the absolute opposite of what those guys at Locked On Avalanche did. I have the Carolina Hurricanes over the Avs in 7 games. Yes, we are going the full distance. No 5, no 6. It is system against system. It is run and gun. Colorado Avalanche. We've got Nathan McKinnon, Kyle McCarr, Gabriel Landeskog, Devontae's, all of those guys. Martin Necas, Brent Burns, Jack Drury. Bring some former Hurricanes to face the Hurricanes in the final, because why not? Let's add some extra chaos. But then on the Hurricane side, you got Aho, Jarvis, Ehlers, Svechnikov, Blake, Stankoven, Slavin, Walker, Chatfield, and of course you got the goalies, Anderson and Kochetkov. I think the Hurricanes are going to go system to it's going to be a system for system battle in the Cup final. Who's going to stand out? It's the defensive mindset of the Hurricanes with their transition game compared to the run and gun style of the Avalanche. It'll be very exciting. I know a lot of people who are Avs and Canes fans, and I know they're stressing about this game because they might like both teams. While they might be happy one of them wins, it's who they're going to pick the most to win the Cup. But for me, like I said, Carolina Hurricanes over the Colorado Avalanche in 7 games. So that is my official 2025-2026 Stanley Cup prediction. Hurricanes in 7 over the Avalanche. So let me know in the comments, what do you feel about my Metro prediction? Do you feel like that I did a pretty decent job? Where would you kind of change of where certain teams finish within the Metro? Do you think the Rangers possibly make it? Do you think the Islanders make it? Do you think Columbus misses out? How do you feel about the Devils and the Hurricanes fighting for the top spot? Let me know in the comments. Also, let me know in the comments what you think about my Stanley Cup prediction right here on the screen. Do you see the Hurricanes winning it all? Do you see them beating the Avalanche, or do you see them playing maybe Vegas or Dallas or or Edmonton? Do you see a 2006 Cup final rematch? Who knows? But let me know in the comments what you think. Let me know about my 2025-26 Metro Division predictions, and also let me know about my 2026 Stanley Cup prediction. But like I said, for me, Hurricanes win a division. They win the Eastern Conference, and they go win the Stanley Cup in 7 over Colorado. System first system. So let me know what you think. I'm excited for the fact that we finally got to the episode where I just predict. I could be wrong. I could be right. It could be somewhere in the middle, but that's the beauty about predictions. We'll see how it goes because paper says one thing, but what does it say on the ice? That is the biggest factor of them all. But that's where I kind of stand right now. Hurricanes win a division, win the East, and then they beat the Colorado Avalanche in 7 to be the Cup champions for their second time in franchise history, knocking off the Avs. So let me know what you think in the comments below. And we are now just going to be one more day away from the start of the regular season. I don't know about y'all, but I'm ready. It's been a long offseason. We're finally here. NHL hockey's back. Predictions are here. Now we have opening night to look for on Thursday. But until Thursday night, this will be the Wednesday edition of Locked On Hurricanes. Thank you for making it this today. For your second lesson, check out the Locked On Game Night. Every game, every night until a Stanley Cup champion is crowned. Get local analysis on a national scale. Find NHL Game Night on Locked On NHL on YouTube or wherever you listen to your podcast. If you want to keep up with me, I'm a One True Zach on X. The podcast is LO_Hurricanes. I'm also on Blue Sky at the Zachary Martin, where if you click the link to my bio, you can find all of my written content at thehockeywriters.com. Just dropped the opening night roster article with my predictions of the lines. Make sure to go check that out. Going to do some game previews here very, very soon. So check out all of my written stuff at thehockeywriters.com as I enter my third season as a credential writer for them covering your Carolina Hurricanes. If you want to check out my other podcasts, it's The Search Cast on all podcast platforms and on YouTube. For Locked On Hurricanes, we're on Spotify, Google, Apple, iHeartRadio. Wherever you listen to your podcast, make sure you leave a 5-star rating and review because I might just read it on the show. For YouTube, it's Locked On Hurricanes. Subscribe, hit the bell notifications so you don't miss the show. Hit the thumbs up to let me know if you like the show as well. Share with other Caniacs becoming everydayers just like you. But I hope everyone enjoyed the Wednesday edition of Locked On Hurricanes. Enjoy your Wednesday, and until next time, as always, let's go Canes.